Today on Lead Empowered TV, we are joined by John Bates, a true authority on how communication shapes everything we do. Whether it's leading a team, delivering a pitch, presenting to a room, or simply influencing outcomes in your day-to-day interactions, John knows what works. With deep experience, both as a practitioner and as a coach for top executives, John has mastered the art of leadership presence, TED-style presentations, and pitching with impact. What makes his approach stand out is that he doesn't ask you to change who you are. He gives you simple, actionable principles that enhance your natural style. The result? You're a more confident speaker, more persuasive leader, and more effective in every corner of your professional and personal life. We're diving into his strategies today so you can take your communication and your influence to the next level. John, welcome to the show, my friend. I am so grateful to have you here with us today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Nathan. Thank you. Glad to be here.
You bet. So I'm so excited about just digging into your work for the next 25 minutes or so. And, one of the things that I noticed by visiting your website is that your work leans heavily on the neurobiology side of communication. And can you unpack that, a little bit, help us understand, what's the science of communication changes, and how does that change the way leaders speak and connect at the end of the day?
Yeah, it's more interesting and more fun than maybe it sounds, right? Like I know that it's neurobiology based, it's going to be not very exciting, but really what's exciting about it is that it works. And I think the most important thing right up front for people to know about what I mean when I say it's neurobiology based and where that leads us is the thing that I say probably more than anything, which is communicating with human beings is not logical. You may have noticed it's not logical, it's biological. And when you understand the biology, you can make it logical again. But anybody who goes in thinking logic by itself should be persuasive or move people to take action or generate trust or loyalty or anything like that
Right.
is just going to never be very effective.
So what you're saying is there's a real science behind leadership communication and garnering influence and trust with those that you lead or even the audience that you're speaking to when you're giving a presentation from the front of the room.
All of it, right? And I mean, in your personal life, in your professional life, everywhere, anywhere that you are communicating with human beings.
Yeah, and you've worked with a lot of organizations, a lot of leaders. You've worked with NASA to Accenture. What is one common communication challenge that you see across industries, and how do you help leaders and communicators overcome that?
Well, I mean, the biggest thing that I see in the business world is that we steer away from what makes us human. We're worried about trying to make some sort of an emotional connection. I mean, when I work with these people, like I got to train everybody at the very top of General Electric Aerospace years ago for their big global customer summit. I told everybody we're going to make an emotional connection. And
Right.
it's like, what are you talking about? Like people don't want to do that. They're afraid of it. And when I say, we're going to tell a personal story and make an emotional connection. And I think that one of the reasons that people steer away from that so much is because we've seen it done both poorly, which is not what I'm talking about. Like when you do that badly and it's maudlin and it's uncomfortable and yucky, that's not good. And we've
Right.
also seen it done not as influence, but as manipulation, right? We've seen it done inauthentically, selfishly, and then we've seen it done poorly. So we're like, okay, I'm just never going to even try that. But that's leaving the most important piece of your communication out of the mix. And you're just never going to be as successful if you do that.
So when you're presenting in the front of a room and you talk about that, we're going to have an emotional connection today as
Yeah.
communicators. And
Yeah.
I kind of got the impression from you that when people hear that, they kind of clam up, in the audience. And do you think that stems from just people are afraid to be vulnerable or to be authentic, that, they have to live up to a certain standard, let's say in the traditional workplace, they can't bring their full authentic self to the office? Well, what do you think's going through their head as a consultant, knowing what you see on the other side?
Yeah. Well, So I always start my trainings with a short little story that I think kind of sets the mood. And so I'll share that with you real quick. The way that all of this happened for me is that I was always the guy with the soft skills. And I always worked with people who had the hard skills, and I was jealous of them. They made more than I did, but I was always a founder or a co-founder or an early stage employee at .com companies. And I raised several $100 million with my various teams. But the people that I was essentially paying would say, "Oh, John, he does the fluffy stuff." So I just never got the value of what I did. And then in 2009, I went to the TED conference for the first time, and I just saw person after person give the most unbelievable talks I had ever heard in my life. And I had two big realizations there at TED. The first one was, wow, that's powerful. It was the first time I ever got a sense of my own value. And I was like, okay, call it fluffy if you will, but that does have power. And then the second thing I realized is that I'd been going around thinking I was this great speaker. But the reason I thought I was such a great speaker is because I was speaking at tech conferences, you know? So I realized there was this huge gap between where I was and where I could be. So I came back, got really, really involved in the TED and TEDx community. And at one of the first ever TEDx events in LA, it's in Santa Monica, I was volunteering for my friends who were putting that one on. And we had this guy who had all the hard skills in the world, had the most exciting topic. And when he got up on stage and started to speak, everybody just checked out because he was so nervous and awkward. We all thought we were going to throw up for him. And I remember being first really sad, genuinely sad, because like that's the guy I was waiting for all day. But then I got mad because I thought about what that must have cost my companies to have people like that. Super, super brilliant, but not very good at communicating. And then the evil part of me popped out there in the back of the room, and I was going, ah, ha, 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 hard skills guy is blowing it, calls what I do fluffy, neener, neener. And as I was doing that, my buddy came over and he leaned down and he said, dude, we got to do something to help people like this. And that was the moment that changed my entire whole life. Because I realized in that moment that if I just got over myself for 5 minutes, I could totally make a difference for that guy. So I went home that night, ditched the chip on my shoulder, and started working on what I get to do all over the world now. And the thing I did differently that I think opened was the magic key that opened the door to all those places like General Electric and NASA and, Johnson and Johnson that I work with now is, I based everything I could in human evolutionary biology and human neurophysiology so I could show people not only what works, but also why it works based in science. And that just changed everything. And one of the key factors is that until you make an emotional connection of some kind, all the logic in the world just bounces off. And so that's how I start when I walk into the room with these, big engineering leaders or people like that. And, hopefully that's me walking my talk, making an emotional connection, being a little bit vulnerable, sharing where I came from and how I used to I didn't used to value myself. And when I tell that story, I just watch people like come down off the ceiling, because when I walk in, they're all afraid I'm going to be judging them and I'm going to be thinking I'm all hot because I'm this speaker that their people hired. And when I walk in and I share that story, they relax and they kind of get where we're going. And then I can refer back later and say, that it wasn't a big deal. We didn't hold hands and cry together, but that opening story makes some sort of an emotional connection. And I let people know how I think and what matters to me and where this all came from. And that's what I'm talking about. Ultimately, it's just what works with human beings.
Yeah, it's that whole idea of being interesting, right, to people. And once we're interesting, they become interested, and
Yeah.
especially in that dynamic. But when you're sitting across a table from somebody in a one-to-one, I think it's really important to be interested in hearing their story, right? And then they are willing to reciprocate. And
Yeah.
sometimes that's hard to do, especially if both people are trying to work that same angle, right, and put the
Right.
other person first. So you're just going to have to go with it at time. But since you brought up the whole TEDx thing, let's dig a little bit deeper into that, because I know that you've coached TED and TEDx formats to individuals. What are the core elements that make a talk truly TED worthy, beyond the usual advice of great slides and delivery? What are
Yeah.
some of the things that you coach people on to improve those styles of those types
Well,
of presentations?
yeah, so there's a few things, and one big thing that I think people don't know, and I know I did not know this. I mean, the first time I spoke at TED, Nathan, I blew it. It was so bad. And like nobody said, John, you blew it. It took me a little while to realize how badly I'd blown it. But if you Google John Bates TED fail, I'm the first result. And and what I did is I did it for myself. I was a side stage, right? I've spoken at TED 3 times, always on side stages, but it's TED, at least I spoke at TED. And the first time was awful. And there are a number of things I did that made it awful, but the biggest thing I did that made it truly awful was I did it for myself. I was trying to establish myself as an expert and be seen as a leader in my field, and like using TED to do that. And dude, that's a horrible idea. That does not work. I've seen a lot of TEDx talks where I think that was kind of the underlying motivation, and
Sure.
they're awful. People shouldn't have done those. Um, so what I didn't know till afterwards is there is a thing called the TED commandments. And, I've actually broken them down. If you want to put it in the show notes, I can give you a
Sure.
link to breaking down the TED commandments. But so I'll tell you a couple of the commandments, and then I'll tell you the one biggest secret. So one of the TED commandments is that, it's basically something like, thou shalt not just tell us the good stuff. You got to tell us about the downs part and when you were ready to give up and all that kind of stuff. So, it's what I call, I have a little fake TM on it, insightful vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
TED actually in the TED commandments says, bring some vulnerability and tell us about the downside, not just the successes. And people never do that in these bad TEDx talks. And there's great TEDx talks too, but in the bad ones, that's one of the things that's missing. And then, there's another one that says, thou shalt not pitch, it like, thou shalt not sell from stage, or you'll be thrown into outer darkness. And that's kind of what I did the first time. I wasn't selling anything, but I was selling myself. I was trying to use that platform to establish myself. And that's a terrible thing to do, both to yourself and the audience. But then here's the other biggest thing, I think, for TEDx talks and for the whole TED format. And one of the things that really is great to think about anytime, but especially it has to be there for such a short format talk. It's advice that I would give in the form of a question. What is your one idea we're spreading? Not your top 2 or your best 5 or whatever. Or here's the 3, no, what is your one idea we're spreading? And then just have that entire 18 minutes or less really truly support one idea, because in 18 minutes or less, you just don't have time to do more than that. When I tried to do a lot more than that in my 4-minute talk, oh my gosh. Oh, it was so embarrassing.
What I like about what you said is just the whole idea of being vulnerable and authentic, sharing where we struggled. Because I think from my own experience, I've found that people really connect more with my weaknesses and my failures than they ever will from me touting my successes at the end of the day.
Do you want
Right.
to hear a quote from Les Brown that would totally?
Absolutely.
Okay, so
Yeah.
here's what Les taught me years ago. people don't connect with your successes.
Mhm.
They connect with your messes. Your message is in your mess.
Yeah,
That's how you connect with people.
and that's one of the things I love about, what I've found about you online is just the whole authentic style, that you bring to your coaching and your communication work that you do with people. You're not trying to change their voice. You're really trying to help them embrace who they are.
Yeah.
So how do you help clients discover and elevate, that genuine communication strength that they have and bring to the table so they can embrace who they are and not feel ashamed of who they're bringing to the stage at the end of the day?
So one of the, there's a few ways, but one big thing is out of that experience that I shared earlier, I created and like, laid open for myself a bunch of principles that are based in the neurobiology and the evolutionary biology of what it means to be human. And when people understand those principles and then the other principles that I put into my coaching and training, the cool thing about getting a principle is that when you understand the principle, you don't have to memorize it. You understand, So I work with people on principles based learning that's based in the science of communication. And it doesn't leave them with a whole lot of stuff to remember. It just leaves them understanding what's happening so that they can not only be more successful with it, but they can be more relaxed and more confident. And they know not only what to do, but also why they're doing it. And that is a huge piece in and of itself because people just get a whole new level of genuine deserved confidence because they understand that stuff. Right. And so knowing those principles and being able to work those principles is huge. And then one of the first things that I always do with people when I work with them is to once they understand the principles, the first place we apply it is working on their origin story. Because I think that as a leader, having a really well chosen, well crafted, well told origin story is one of your most important tools. And that origin story, we craft it in a very specific way with a little bit of insightful vulnerability and a little bit of insight into what makes people tick. And when they share that origin story, it's as if we craft glasses that they can carry around. And when they put these glasses, let's say, Nathan, make you look really, really good. So we craft your origin story so that the minute you tell that origin story, it's like you put these glasses on me. And now I will forever see you through these glasses that make you look really good, And, I think that story that I shared here, that's one of my origin stories. And when I tell that story, like when I shared that to the NASA astronauts, it's interesting to just watch the room kind of relax and people are like, oh, okay, that's what this is. Great. Okay. And everybody's like, it gets rid of all that initial like uptightness. And it really is it's been a very helpful tool for me as I go work with these groups. Cause you can imagine when they bring in the speaker coach guy, it's like the engineers are not thrilled about it usually.
Well, one of the things I think is important about what you said is that with this approach that you're talking about today, it breaks down walls, right? It kind
Yeah.
of lowers those walls of self-preservation that people have in the audience. And it's almost like you as the presenter, or I mean, you can even relate this to pastoral type communications. You're trying to serve as a mirror to that person that's on the other side of you. You're
Yes.
being authentic, you're being vulnerable. So at the end of whatever the 45-minute talk or the hour long, coaching session or pastoral session, whatever it is, by the time that's done, they see bits and pieces of your story in them.
And Nathan, I keep hearing you say that a similar idea and bring it back to our conversation. I just want to
Yeah.
acknowledge it explicitly. I love that you think like that. You are absolutely right to think like that. And I'm usually working with people who are already not sharing their stories very much.
Right.
So I'm always pushing people to share their stories and share their origin story and their leadership stories. And I always remind them that when you share your origin story, let's say, because you just shared this open, vulnerable, kind of meaningful, insightful story about yourself. You didn't share it for you. You shared it for them. It was about you, but you shared it for them. And once you share that story, start really turning up turn the volume up on listening, because they're going to now feel safe to share a story back with you. Right. People are so afraid to go first, but when you as a leader go first with something like that and then make it, you know, create a space for them to share their stuff back, it's amazing what happens. And that's really a big part of why I want people to have an origin story and go share it, is because it opens up the floodgates of just back and forth communication and connection in such a wonderful way.
Well, John, we've got a few minutes left here in our episode together, so I would just like to extend this time to you to let my audience know, where can they learn more about you and how do they get involved with working with you? I've shared a QR code here several times during our conversation today, just letting them go to your website because I know you offer some great free leadership training that
Yeah.
they can have access to. So I've been sharing that, but yeah, share where they can find you and what that process looks like.
Okay, fabulous. Thank you. So if they go to that website, when they go there, there'll be a little pop up, and that pop up is for my weekly micro trainings. They're about 1 to 2 minute videos with a short write up. And I do those for all of my clients like NASA and Johnson & Johnson and Boston Scientific and Accenture. And if your listeners would like those for free, they can sign up in that pop up, or they can go to like the resources or whatever and get I think we might even call it a newsletter or a micro training or whatever, but whatever it's called, it's something like that. And it is a weekly micro training. And I really go out of my way to try to make that valuable. And then on LinkedIn, I'm just, /in/John Bates, JOHNBATES. I also put out a lot of content that's from the heart, that is just purely trying to be of service there. So that's another great place to follow me. On Instagram, I'm John K. Bates. And, that's more if you want to like get a hello from me in the morning when I'm hiking in the hills behind my house or something. But, and people can reach out to me at either johnbates.com or executivespeakingsuccess.com. Really easy to send me a form from either of those websites if they'd like to talk. And I would love to hear from them. And, if they mention that they heard me here, I'd be happy to jump on like a 30-minute consultation call and just hear where they're stuck, hear what they're working on, hear what they have coming up, give them something in that call that will make a difference. And then if there's further conversation to be had, we can have it.
All right, John. Well, thank you so much for sharing your insights today. Your approach to communication is helping leaders speak more authentically while maximizing their influence. And I just think that's really, really inspiring. I know that our
Thank you.
audience is going to walk away with, practical ideas that they can start using immediately. And for anyone who wants a deeper dive into your work, visit John's website, scan the QR code, and he will deliver value to you. So thank you so much, my friend, for being here. I really appreciate your time.
You are welcome,
All
Nathan.
right.
Thank you.
You bet.